Hey guys, David Holder from Raised Hunting, and I'm here to talk to you today about something that's super important now. It's going to be even more important in a month or two, and then it's going to be the most important when we actually get into hunting season and we're chasing those big bucks. And that's stand locations. And I'm particularly talking about stand locations. I'm going to do a whole separate video where I'll talk about blind locations, completely different, because I handle them almost completely different. So today what we're talking about though is stand locations. How do we pick them? What are we looking for? What are some of the terminology? And I basically broke it down into 7 categories. And the 7 categories are funnels, field edges, fence lines, cruising locations, bedding areas, transition areas, and food sources. And when you think about those, some of them sound very similar, but we have stands that, and I'm going to give you kind of a rundown of kind of the stands we have, why they're there, what I'm looking for. Now, if you can cross manipulate some of those, meaning if you can take and have a field edge that is also a good funnel, and that if you can have a good fence line that runs that means that you got even the best of 3 different worlds there. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let's talk about the first one, is funnels. What are we talking about when we're talking about a funnel stand? What we're talking about is a place where it could be timber, it could be agriculture, it could be field edges, but something that necks everything down into a corridor or a funnel where deer have to come by that area without exposing themselves to the wide open. And so one of the biggest ones is timber. Look for timber places that start with big strategic pieces of timber and then neck down to smaller ones. We have one that we call OW. And I love this one because it's actually not so much timber as it is 2 ridges that convene right coming out of an agriculture field. And the other thing is there's a creek running by there. So it kind of makes 3 different things that all come together. The creek runs to the field. Field is in front of me. And then the 2 ridges are on either side of me. So it's a natural funnel for those deer to come up through there. It works super well. The other thing that what a lot of time funnels will do for you is they will give you one good wind direction, and you'll get a consistent wind there typically because of the way the terrain lays. So that's one type of funnel. Another funnel that I have is I call it the well stand. And the well stand is set between 2 creeks and 1 ridge, and it's off of a food plot. And so what it is, it's not on the food plot. I can't shoot to the food plot. I'm actually probably 100 yards away from the food plot. And you're going to hear me talk more about being off of your food sources. And I'm not a big food source sitter, other than that is a place to have stands, and it can be super effective. But particularly when we're talking about funnels, we're talking about things that come together and force the deer into those areas. So that's just one. The next one is edges. And there's different types of edges. I mean, you could have a field edge, okay, agriculture land, and then it goes into a big block of timber, and you're sitting there where you can shoot 30, 40 yards into the timber, but you can also shoot out into the agriculture. That would be one type of edge. Not necessarily better, but the edge that I like even better is an edge of timber to brush, or timber to some kind of change of timber. Man, they seem like they're just natural attractants for big bucks to walk those. And what I mean by that is you could have pines in an area that goes into hardwoods, and it makes a natural edge right through the timber. And I have found that those transition areas right there can be absolutely spectacular. Okay, I hunt one that I call OM, and that one is just a very simple edge that works where these deer walk the edge of it. Another one is a spot where Warren killed one of the biggest bucks that we've killed. It's a Boone and Crockett kind of deer. And that stand is sitting there. Actually, I have a rub tree. That's one of the places where I have one of my rub trees that's not in a food plot. It's not out in the open. It's just in the timber, but it's on this edge. And all that edge is that I'm talking about, if you didn't really pay attention, you would miss it, because it goes from timber to timber, but you can see something was different years and years ago that created an edge right through the timber. And I picked up on that, stuck a stand in there, threw a rub tree in there, Warren stuck an arrow in this huge deer. So they can be super beneficial when you just remember edges, and not necessarily a field edge. That's one type. Another one, fence lines. Man, I like fence lines. I could sit here for 15 minutes and talk to you about all the different stands I have on fence lines. And now some of those fence lines can be borders where we can't hunt the other side, but we can hunt our side. Other times there are fence lines within the property that we're hunting. Some of them are old fence lines, some of them are new fence lines. When you get good fences that are in the area and you get a break in the fence, meaning it's bent down or a tree falls on it or something like that, those can be a super funnel that's a fence line. And the deer will figure out where those easy places are to cross those fences, and that will be a great place to put a stand. The other one, though, is just the fence line itself. Fence lines themselves often run from agriculture down through the timber. And what will happen is those deer will leave their feeding areas and follow the fence line back to a bedding area. I can't tell you how many times that we have used this to our advantage. I have one particular stand I call Midget. Don't worry about why I named it that, but anyhow, long story short is it's right on a fence line. And I can't tell you how many deer I've actually shot, and big bucks. Matter of fact, the biggest buck that I've ever killed was walking down that fence line. And so that's why we hunt there. So fence lines are like, in my book, if there was a grading system, 1 to 10 and 10 being the best, fence lines are probably a 9. So just keep that in mind. So the next one is cruising locations. And cruising locations are places where deer will walk through, hopefully during daylight hours, and expose themselves, but without having to necessarily expose themselves out into the middle of an agriculture field or some kind of field, an opening where people could see them from the road or something like that. Cruising stands can be stands that are on tops of ridges, on the side of a ridge. I have a couple of them that again, Midget is one that I mentioned that earlier. And again, like I said, when you have multiple things that give you a reason to put a stand, it gives you more and more reasons why deer will come by you. It's probably going to be a really productive stand. But there's a particular stand that fits this one, the cruising location. I call it the deep stand. And that one it's probably 200 yards off of an agriculture field. So we're not hunting the edge. We're not hunting deer coming to or from necessarily from a feeding location. What it is also about 250 yards, maybe not even that far, 200 yards from a bedding area. And so what happens is it's on the side of a ridge. Wind is always good as long as I have a northwest wind. It's blowing back into some blowdown stuff where the deer can't get around me. But what I catch there a lot of times is these deer coming through during daylight hours, during the rut, cruising the edge of that bedding area. It's real thick. They don't have to go in there and find them. They can simply walk the edge of it and smell the does that might be in there. So it's an awesome cruising location. We've killed some really good deer. Karen killed one that was spectacular out of there. So it works out really good. Actually, Warren killed the largest weight-wise deer that we've ever shot out of that same location. So that's another one that can be really good, is a cruising location. They're a little tougher to find because there's not a lot of terrain or something that's going to give you a read on that. What you're going to find, you're going to have to learn your deer. Once you learn the deer in your area, then they will tell you where those cruising locations are. Transition stands, similar to a cruising location, but not really. And that is, a transition stand is a stand that you put up intentionally from food to bedding. That's my favorite type of transition stand, or vice versa, from bedding to food. They're either going to be coming through there to get there. The other one, though, can be from food to food, or bedding to bedding. And so you keep those in mind as well. I have one I call the road stand, and it's called that because it's simply, there is a dirt road, gravel. It's not gravel. It's not something someone can drive down. It's just a farm road that I have to be able to go from one of my agriculture fields to another agriculture field. The deer use that road all the time. They come out in the food plot, they feed in there, and then they work themselves out into a bigger field. And so what that allows me to do is hunt that area right there, so they come right by, and it's a natural place for them to walk. So keep that in mind, that can be super beneficial when you're looking for those locations. Transition stands can be spectacular. One that I love and I hate, and hang on, I'm going to save that. Actually, the next two are going to be the two that I'm going to tell you, they can be the most productive, they can be the most fun, but they can also, boy, they can sting. I mean that seriously, so keep this in mind. If you're going to hunt food sources are awesome. They're fun because you see a lot of deer typically. There's usually something you're hunting that's pretty open. You can see the food source. And so when you sit on food sources like an agriculture field, corn, beans, your own food plot, whatever that may be, that can be great. The problem is, what bites you in the butt is getting in and out of those stands. That can be the problem, especially when you have 20, 30 deer that might show up, or 10 deer, or 2 deer, but it's not the deer that you want to shoot. Now you got to find a way to get out of that stand if it's in an evening without them knowing you're there, so that you don't start busting the deer. And those can be really difficult stands to get in the morning, because the deer obviously in there at night feeding in those areas. So I'm not a big fan of food source locations. I will tell you this, I love them when, and I should have listed this maybe as another type of stand, and that's an observation point. Sitting over a food source someplace that I can see a whole bunch of it, but usually when I talk about an observation stand and I put it on a food source, that food source has got to be pretty large, because I want to be able to see the whole food source, be able to get in and out of the stand without the deer having them stay in the food source when I leave. So keep that in mind. There's some things you can do though for your food sources that will help you be able to hunt those. One is you can put barriers in there. What I mean by, you can stack round bales along the edge of the field so you can walk up to the stand and climb up in it and they don't know you're getting in it. The other one is you can push brush. If you do any clearing of your food plots, keep that brush and protect your stand that way and push that stuff up against there. Biggest one is wind. In all these situations, I can tell you the number one thing, the number one absolute that you got to take into account for every one of these stands, no matter what kind, is wind direction. So keep that in mind when you're putting these in. A couple other things you can do for your food sources is you can plant, they make Egyptian sorghum. Lots of companies are making different things now that grow real tall and create a barrier. If you make it 6-7 feet wide, they can't see through it, and then you can walk right in. Another little trick that I'll do sometimes on food sources is I'll rake an area or take a blower and blow the leaves away so that I can walk up to that tree and climb up in that tree and they never know that I was there. So just a few things to think about when you really want to get serious about killing big whitetails and you really want to hunt those food sources. You're going to have to do a little extra work, because otherwise you may just be watching a bunch of deer. So the last one, and this one's controversial in some regards, I would say, hunting bedding areas. I can't tell you how many whitetail hunters I know that just say they don't do it. We do. We actually, at the right time of the year, we may not get in the bedding area, because I agree that can be really, really scary. You don't want deer bedded all around you. And I've had that happen before, and it's not good. I mean, it's not what you want. But being right on the edge of those bedding areas can be absolutely fantastic. Excuse me. So 2 different stand locations that I would tell you that are on or right as close as we can get to a bedding area. I have one that I call Wag South. And the reason I call it that is because it's on the south end of a really heavy bedding area, and it works out really good. We've killed numerous deer. We've seen, I mean, the biggest deer I ever killed, one of the first times I ever saw him was out of that stand. Easton has killed deer out of that stand. And what it is that is a location that we will move into typically not till we get like way down the road toward the rut. That's not going to be a stand you want to sit in like early season. And because you're pushing the issue there. What we're doing is we're catching those deer when they now are checking those bedding areas without going into them, because they're trying to save time and save energy going from one doe to the other. Another one that I refer to is Skyscraper. And that one, I can tell you, it is, when I say it's on the edge of the bedding area, I mean, like, we're talking serious edge. You could almost consider this in the bedding area. But the great thing about it is on top of a ridge. Ridge faces the east. And so those deer love to come out in October, November here in Iowa and bed on that east side of that ridge. Well, typically we get northwest winds, and that works in our favor when they're facing east like that. We have a northwest wind, it blows our wind off of the ridge. So all of our deer approach without ever getting, and they typically come down and turn around and go back into the bedding area. So it can be great, but it's got to be very cautiously hunted. It's really got to be something that you save for when you absolutely feel like this is the time that I can move in there. And that'll be one of those locations where I would possibly decide to spend all day. I don't want to take any chances of going in and out of bedding areas and have something go wrong. So those are the things that, this is, like I said, this was just 7 breakdowns. The one that I didn't add in there, you could add an observation as a whole nother category. But typically observation stands for us, or we only utilize them when we're hunting someplace for the first time, with new spot, and we're going to stay out. We're going to want to get close. We want to see what the deer are doing, but we also want to have a chance of possibly getting a shot at one. So we'll put a stand up where we can cover a bunch of ground and see what the deer are doing. So I hope that helps you. I hope I broke that down. If you've got questions, shoot them to us. We'll try to answer as many as we can. I'm going through a whole series right now where I'm talking about tree stands and blind locations. I'm going to talk about different stands, why we use ladder stands, why we use hang-on stands, saddles, climbers. I've used them all, guys, and I'm not pushing a particular product or certain companies. I'm not telling you, I'm just telling you what we use and why we're using them in those locations. So same as what we're doing here. I'm not telling you that every stand we put up works fantastic. I'm telling you the ones that I have found that have worked over tried and true. We've gone through lots of repetitions, and these 7 locations that I've picked out here seem to be the ones that have paid the most dividends for us, and we've seen the best buck movement out of them. So I hope that helps you guys. Thanks for watching.